Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. Now, when this video goes out, the IndyCar 2025 season will have already started. However, I wanted to do a tier list, giving you my thoughts of some of the teams and the drivers who will race for them this year. With that in mind, let's get on with it. I've never done a tier list before, and I'm doing this tier list on the day that the first IndyCar race is due to take place. I realise the video hasn't come out at that time, but I wanted some content for all of you when I'm away. So here's a little bit of content for you. This is, simply put, my opinions on the IndyCar drivers for this season. With that out of the way, let's get on with it. Car number 83 is Robert Shwartzman. Anybody who follows the lower tier formulas will know that Robert Shwartzman is a really, really good driver. I do quite like him, but he is with Prema. Prema, again, anybody who follows lower tier formula will know this, are an excellent team, but they are brand new to IndyCar. So for the first year, I do worry about Robert Shwartzman. His talent will shine through on occasion, but I do worry about how he'll deal with oval racing, as I'm pretty convinced Robert Shwartzman has never participated in an oval race. Therefore, he will be fighting for scraps, unfortunately, which is a shame, but next year, 2026, if he's still around, he will be an excellent addition to the IndyCar roster, in my opinion. Car 90 is Callum Ilott. For those of you who know, I'm a big Callum Ilott fan. He's obviously got a couple of years of experience, but he is with Prema as well. They're a brand new team, and his qualifying didn't go terribly well at St. Pete, did it? So he'll be starting from 27th. Obviously, by the time this video goes out, that race will be long gone. However, I think because he's got the experience and the technical know-how, I'm going to put him mid-pack. I think he'll probably finish ahead of his teammate Robert Shwartzman, but perhaps not by as much as people think. I do like Prema, and I'm very, very hopeful that they can be a solid team for many years to come. With that in mind, let's go number 77. Oh yes. Well, I wasn't terribly impressed with Stingray Rob. If FP1 Will ever watches this video, I apologise profusely. I'm sure it's the first thing he ever watches. However, we do have a tier category just for Stingray Rob. He wasn't brilliant last year. Hopefully he does improve, but sadly, he's got to go at the bottom here. Now, Connor Daly is an interesting one in car 78. I'm glad he's got a spot on the grid, because on oval racing, that guy is on it. He's really, really good, but I think his road course racing is going to let him down a little bit. Again, Junkos Hollinger are perhaps not the best funded team in the world, which is why Grosjean left them. Unfortunately, I can't really work out where to put him, because if this was just ovals, he'd be mid-pack, but if it was just street circuits, he'd be fighting for scraps. There are more street circuits than ovals, so he has to go fighting for scraps. Number 6 is Nolan Siegel. Now, Nolan Siegel's a really interesting case, because it never occurred to me that he'd be very, very good. He didn't show that much, in my opinion, in Indy Next, when he was launched into the Junkos Hollinger car after Canapino's, should we call them escapades, last year. So I wasn't terribly impressed. However, he's actually qualified pretty well. I think he might surprise a few people this year. There's a lot of pressure on his young shoulders, so I am going to go with P in the mid-pack, because that's where I think Siegel is going to finish. He'll be toward the lower end of the mid-pack, and I think 2026 will be make or break for him rather than anything else. Car 7, Christian Lundgaard. Again, another graduate of F2 to IndyCar. That is quite the pipeline. Callum Ilott and Shwartzman have basically done the same thing. This is going to be a bit easier because McLaren are an excellent team, as you all know. They won the F1 Constructors last year. They're very, very good in IndyCar. I don't think I can put him as a god tier driver. He hasn't really done enough, but that's because Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan, whom he was with last year, weren't that good. With that in mind then, he's going to be the first of our front runners. I think he may even nab a win or two this year, but I don't think he's quite god tier, at least not yet. So car 23 is actually Ryan Hunter-Reay. As he is only going to participate in the Indy 500, I'm going to have to put him on Stingray Rob's level. Have I done him dirty there? Maybe, but I am rather making up these rules as I go along. Number 9 is Scott Dixon. Scott Dixon, I remember being a teenager and thinking, wow, that guy is going to have a brilliant and long career. And it's certainly proven that way, hasn't it? He's won several championships, and the guy would be a credit to any series he races in. So welcome to our first God tier driver, Scott Dixon. Car 24 is Jack Harvey, so it's going to be a very similar story with him as it was to RHR. Unfortunately, he is going in with Stingray Rob. Driver number 30 is Devlin DeFrancesco. Now, he used to race for Andretti, and his contract expired and they didn't renew it. He wasn't very good, in my opinion, in 2023, which is why he didn't have a seat. He returns to Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan, and I can't see that being a very happy return for him. So I'm going to put him fighting for scraps, unfortunately. Next up is car number 10, and that is, but who else? Alex Palou himself. I think we don't really have to think very long or very hard about this one, do we? Alex Palou has won 40 of the last 31 championships in this series. He has to go god tier. Although what I'd really like to see him do this year is break his duck on an oval. Not that that ever ends up being necessary, given he's thousands of points ahead by the halfway point of the season in any case. Now, driver number 60 is Felix Rosenqvist. I've been impressed with him as he's gone from strength to strength, in my opinion. He's obviously with a new team this year, which I think may hold him back just a smidge, which is why I'm going to put him in the mid-pack. Next up, number 12 is Will Power. Will Power has been around for a very long time in IndyCar. He is, alongside Scott Dixon, by far and away one of the oldest drivers competing at this level. And he is an absolutely superb driver. In fact, he's the only one who's been able to break Alex Palou's duck in winning championships in recent memory, which is why Will Power goes to God tier. For 2025, number 66, Marcus Armstrong moves to Meyershank Racing. I think, being realistic, that's probably a bit of a downgrade for him. However, the charter system has absolutely destroyed what was a very good upward trajectory for him. I still think he's a top driver, however. As a result of that, I think he's going to be mid-pack this year, unfortunately. I would have put him as a front runner, but it will take him far too long to embed in a new team, at least in my opinion. Car 98 is Marco Andretti. He will only be racing in the Indianapolis 500, so you all know where Marco Andretti is going to spend the rest of his time on this tier maker list. Now, car 14, I was waiting to do car 14. It is, of course, Mr. Controversy himself, Santino Ferrucci. Now, Santino Ferrucci has a very checkered past, but one of the things that you can't say about him is that he's not a good driver. Ferrucci is feisty, agile, and very quick to temper. He's one of the most exciting guys in IndyCar, and I, for one, despite some of the issues I might have with some of his behaviour, I'm really, really glad he's staying on the grid. With that in mind, I am putting him, again partly down to machinery, in the mid-pack. Car number 8 is Kyffin Simpson. I'm not a terribly big fan of Simpson. Simpson is a classic pay driver in my opinion, and I don't think he warrants an IndyCar seat at this present moment. He has been able to get that seat via the use of the charter system, or rather, he's been able to pay a lot of money. In my opinion, despite the fact he's with a top team, Kiffin Simpson will be fighting for scraps this year. Car 18, and I'm really happy that Rinus VeeKay has taken one of the last remaining seats on the grid. I think he's a really talented driver, and he was pretty unlucky to be let go from Ed Carpenter Racing at the end of last year. However, it's going to take him time to embed in a new team, which is why I can't decide between mid-pack and fighting for scraps. Bearing in mind VeeKay is a phenomenally talented driver, I'm going to put him in the mid-pack, but he will be toward the lower end of the mid-pack. Car number 3 is Scott McLaughlin. I was stunned when he moved over from V8 supercars. I did do something very silly, and I questioned Roger Penske, which isn't something you should ever do, because regardless of his aging years, the man is simply outstanding. He even had a chance at getting the championship until the final race of last season, or at least there was that whole thing where he ended up he was and then he wasn't in the championship after the race started. Very confusing. Either way, because he hasn't yet won a championship, I am going to have to flesh out the front runners a little bit. He may win a race or two, and he'll probably be a contender. Car 20 is Alexander Rossi. Now, Rossi, I like Rossi. I think he's been a solid driver for many years, but that's all he's been. I can't really remember the last moment of absolute Rossi brilliance, which is why McLaren did not keep him coming into this year. I'm glad he's on the grid. He is a talented driver, of course, which is why I'm going to put him, along with Ed Carpenter Racing, once again in the mid-pack. It would appear someone has mucked up with this tier-making image, because we've already done car number 6, that's Nolan Siegel, so we will be placing him once again in the mid-pack. Car 21 is Alexander Rossi's teammate at Ed Carpenter Racing, who is Christian Rasmussen. I am not a big fan of Christian Rasmussen, actually. He's quite a scruffy, scrappy driver who gets his elbows out a little bit too much, and he doesn't always come off better for it. I think he's going to struggle here, which is why I'm going to put him as fighting for scraps towards the back of the grid. Car 26 is always a good one, Colton Herta. He is perhaps on his day the most naturally with raw talent driver in the entire field. The pace he was showing at the 2023 race at the Music City Grand Prix until he crashed out was absolutely mind-blowing. It was some of the best driving I've ever seen. But he lacks consistency, which is why I'm going to have to put him as a front runner. You know, when you're near Colton Herta, fireworks are always likely to happen. Car 27 is Kyle Kirkwood. I'm a big fan of Kirkwood. He did very well in Indy Next, and he's a solid driver. You can most definitely expect him to constantly be finishing in the top 10, maybe even scrapping for a top 5 in the championship. With that in mind, Kyle Kirkwood joins our list of front runners. Now, we have Marcus Ericsson in car 28. I'm a big fan of Ericsson. I always thought he would have been a very good F1 driver, but as is quite often the case with Formula 1 drivers, it doesn't always work out like that. With that in mind, I am going to place Marcus Ericsson as another front runner. He's with a front running team, and I've always been a fan of his driving. The driver of car 15 is Graham Rahal. I have always wanted to like Graham Rahal. I remember watching his dad race in the mid-90s when I was a very small boy. But I personally think he's always lived on his name a little bit, especially from the 2010s onwards. With that in mind, I can't decide whether to put him mid-pack or fighting for scraps. However, age will catch up with him eventually. I say that he is about my age. That's a terrible thing for me to say. However, I'm going to put him as fighting for scraps. Car number 45 is Louis Foster. Now, Louis Foster is a great driver. He absolutely dominated Indy Next last year, and he is with Rahal, Letterman, Lanigan Racing. In recent past, they were a much better team than they are now, and given that he hasn't actually raced in IndyCar before, I'm going to have to put him as fighting for scraps as well. The driver of car 51 is Jacob Abel. He is again a brand new addition to the series, and he's with Dale Coyne. Dale Coyne have a long and storied history of giving newbies to the series their first opportunity. Take, for example, Romain Grosjean. However, I can't see this ending well for him. Whilst he was decent in Indy Next, he was nothing compared to the man we've just looked at. So unfortunately, I think he's going to be alongside Stingray Rob, right at the back of the field. The driver of car number 5 is Pato O'Ward, probably one of the most exciting alongside Colton Herta drivers that there is in this series. He's also the official test driver for the McLaren F1 team, and you don't get to do that unless you're a bloody talented driver. With that in mind, therefore, because he hasn't yet won a championship, he's come close, and he's come very close in Indy, I can't make him a god-tier driver. Sorry, Mexico. However, he is one of the best drivers on the grid by a mile. Everybody likes him, so into the front-runner pack he goes. Well, it's the driver of car number 2, Joseph Newgarden. Now, Newgarden came very close last year, and he has won the series a couple of times in the past. He is, of course, once again with Team Penske. This is a solid driver and team setup, probably one of the best there is, aside from Palou. With that in mind, there could only really be one place for him on this list, couldn't there? And that is God tier, of course. Now, you'll see that car number 41 remains, and there's a reason for that. I don't know who the hell's driving it. I've tried, and you can probably see from the window up there that I've had a good look for the driver of car number 41, and I can't find it. If any of you would like to tell me who it is, then I'm only too happy to add them to this list. However, in the meantime, given it appears to be driven by nobody, it's going alongside Stingray Rob. So there you have it. That is my driver tier list for the 2025 IndyCar series. If you enjoyed that video, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. The option to subscribe should be appearing on your screens right about now with another video of mine that the algorithm thinks you may enjoy. Cheers.